this thing that like habits take years to change, I don't think it's true. I think it can take a long time to work through shame. But as soon as the shame is cleared, behaviors change immediately.
How's your day been?
Day has been good. It's still the morning here. My day has still got lots of unfolding to do.
Are you a morning person?
Ooh. We're going straight into questions, are we? Hi, welcome to the podcast.
I don't do that stuff. I find it so awkward.
I have an interesting relationship with mornings. I used to think I really wasn't a morning person. And then when I liked my life better, it turned out I loved mornings. I'm going to tell you about my morning routine from recently.
Please do.
I've spent a long time fighting with the fact that I struggle to get out of bed some mornings. And this was particularly relevant when after I exited the company. And there was nothing I had to do in my days, but I had such a strong, there were days where I would struggle to get up first thing in the morning, and then there would be beating myself up, shame around why can't I be productive? Why can't I get up? Why can't I? And that was a similar pattern that I would have for other I've set an intention to meditate each day, and then I'm not meditating, and now I feel now I'm beating myself up for that. That was a pattern that I would notice. And as soon as I had the realization that maybe there's nothing broken about me, maybe if I'm not getting up first thing in the morning, that's my body giving me a really clear signal that that's not what it wants to do. And if instead of fighting that, I welcome that and just go what do I actually want? In that moment where I'm in bed and I feel very resistant to getting up, what do I actually want to do in that moment? And as soon as I asked that, I was like, oh, I just want to curl into a ball and stay here and be frustrated. And I got memories from it. It was there's unprocessed stuff here. And as soon as I went deep into that and just allowed it and was let's see what happens if that's what I do for my morning, is just see what my body wants to do. I realized that it felt really good to spend the first portion of the day just doing that. And then I realized those two things I was beating myself up for, there were others, but not getting out of bed and not meditating. I was I've just meditated for the last hour. I've just stayed in bed, focusing on my body, focusing on what my body feels like and what sensations there are, and just following that flow with an open mind. I've just derived meditation from first principles without trying to force myself to do it. And then everything felt so much nicer. And then it's now I want to get up, and now I want to do productive, there'll be things that I want to get done in my day. And it's all coming from this place of I want to, not I should.
Yes, love that.
And that's my mornings now. I now, for the last few weeks, if I need to be up at 9, I'll set an alarm at 8 and an alarm at 9. And when the alarm goes off at 8, that's my time to just check in with my body. and just have some I get to stay in bed time. And it's such a great time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. I would say, though, for anyone, like, this is great. But for anyone who's depressed, like, do not do this. If you're struggling to get out of bed because you're depressed, it's like, and you're thinking of just dying all the time, it's like fucking book stuff in the morning. Like, make yourself, because then that can just be like the oversleeping, never getting out of bed. But yeah, for everyone else, I think this is great.
How would someone know which one of those to follow for them?
Well, I think you would know if you're seriously depressed and you can't get out of bed. It's like you've got to overcome that. Because I've been in that place. I think because I've had the oversleeping thing. Sorry, I'm not a morning person, but I've also struggled with oversleeping when I don't have enough going on or life isn't exciting enough. And it's like I will just sleep through life. And then that can be a cycle. It makes you more depressed. You just feel lethargic all the time. And then I've had periods where it's like I'm really depressed and it's like, oh, I'm going to meditate for an hour. And I'm so glad I read about this. I think in the Body Keeps a Score, but I'm not sure. But when you're that depressed and your body's like, you know, from a parts perspective, like your body's overwhelmed with like the sadness, depressive parts or suicidal parts, or like I think it's talking about trauma, PTSD, those type of parts. Like, it's like dangerous to meditate because those parts just consume you and you're on your own. So it's like not good. Whereas, so that advice, this is why any of that advice that's just people just write so many books and like hand it out freely on Twitter. It's like, this is what you should do. Like, this is what diet you should eat. This is how you should live your life. And it's like, no, let's just stop prescribing like sweeping ideas about how people should live. But yeah, so meditating is dangerous because I think I would wake up and be like, oh, okay, I'll just meditate for an hour, but it's like consumed by dark thoughts. And then so the way to get out of that is like make sure you're getting up and leaving the house, and also interacting with other humans, because probably you're depressed, you're spending your whole time in your own head, like you've cut yourself off, you believe you're worthless, no one cares about you, no one loves you, no one wants to, you're like repulsive to society or whatever. So if you're in that category, which I think people would know, I mean, if you're in that category and you're listening to this, that's amazing because it means you've like got out of your head to listen to something. And ideally it's like you're on a walk or something when you're listening to a podcast. So that's great. But yeah, it's like plan more stuff in the morning that makes you get out of bed and have purpose. Because it's like can be a spiral. It's like you're so depressed, so you're not working, so you have nowhere to be. Like it's dangerous to be in, for a lot of people, I think, to be in the spot you're in and that I'm in at the moment, where it's like you have like full agency over your time and your life. It's like a lot of people can't do that. And it's like we actually need to be needed and to have the structure and to have the routine, even with like addictions or something. Anyway, that's like a whole nother topic.
Yeah. So there's so many things I want to jump off on. I think the only one that I'll go into is the thing that you brought up about advice. How there's a way to there are two different ways that people show up with these things, right? There's here's what you should do, and there's here's what my experience has been. And those two, I think, I don't know if it's becoming more and more common as the internet gives everyone a voice, but like the lines are getting so blurred between those. And that can get dangerous when someone looks at, here's a thing that someone else did, and therefore I should be doing that, or someone else points out something and it's like, oh, that's what I need to be. It's, it can become very easy to use it to manage ourselves into a different way of being that isn't necessarily best for us. So yeah, I hear that.
Yeah. And I feel like I just did that. So I should rephrase that as, for me, that was not a good thing to do. And for anyone else who might be going through something similar, I'm guessing that alternative approach might help them. But yeah, I shouldn't be like just broadly prescribing to anyone who's struggling with depression.
And the thing is, it's to what extent, like, how, if at all, do you feel a responsibility to, like, you have a podcast, people listen to it. What's your relationship with, like, that feeling of I'm responsible for what people hear and what they then do?
Generally, because it's just people sharing the stories of their own lives, and that's why it's not usually a problem, because I'm just really specifically asking about you and your life, and we avoid opinions. But if someone starts giving opinions, it's like, okay, we're not here to hear your opinions, like, unless it relates to your life story or something. So I generally steer clear of that. But I think with depression and suicide, because I really care about that, and because I lost my brother to suicide, and because of all of those things, and then and so I'm really aware as well, like, with suicide. I don't know if you know this. This is so helpful for people to know. So those thoughts are like fleeting thoughts, and it's not like if you have a suicidal thought once, you're definitely going to carry through with it, which is why suicide protection barriers and stuff are really effective, because like that fleeting thought, and that's why like they've changed like the pharmacology stuff so that it's very difficult to overdose on pretty much everything, and that on anything, and that stuff saves lives. And so talking about means of suicide and showing it in films is really dangerous, because if people don't know, like, people have a fleeting thought, and this is because I work for this crisis helpline thing as well, so we are dealing all the time with people coming in feeling suicidal, and there's like a ladder up thing. It's first thing, like, talking about suicide doesn't suddenly, it's not contagious, everyone's like, that's not how it works. Like, it's, most people have that thought in their life of like, oh, what if I were to die? Like, that's very far away from like carrying it through. But then the next thing is like, okay, have you thought about like the timing, the means, all, there's these steps. And so if people might really feel like overwhelmed with it, but if you don't have the means, and so it's crazy, the data is insane. Like in the UK, you used to be able to put there was town gas in going through ovens or whatever, so that was a very popular method of suicide, and the rates dropped off a cliff when they changed. There was like the biggest infrastructure project ever, I think, in the UK to change all the gas to all households so it's not toxic. And then the rates just drop off a cliff, particularly for women, because that's like a non-aggressive and non-like violent. Men are more likely to take like violent methods. Anyway, so the same thing with guns. If there's less guns around, the rate drops off a cliff. But the same thing with showing it on TV or talking about the means can be dangerous. And I know I'm just like giving examples, but people can't do that anymore with ovens. Anyway, so that's the one thing that I was worried about, because and then I had a professor, the like head of suicide prevention at Oxford, come on this podcast, a psychiatrist, and I asked him about this stuff, because I've had people on here who've been describing like suicide attempts and like what they did, and he was like, yeah, I think it's fine, because it was like failed overdoses and stuff, because again, it's like very difficult to overdose. Anyway, but okay, sorry, such a long spiel. But basically, that thing I feel really passionately about, because that is like a that is just like how the mind works. And I care about, like protecting it from that side. So to make, and then as well as to, when you're in that place of depression, it's like, I don't know, it's just, that's why I made this podcast, I think, to begin with, because I was like, I want more real story, like all the lip service bullshit I was hearing about, like mental health, we really care about your mental health. It's like, I was still like suffering in silence, and like the shame of depression, and like no one knew, and I wasn't, like that stuff wasn't helping me. But what was like hearing genuine stories of people being like honest. And I don't know. So yeah, I just feel like if there's one moment that something said that could change like someone's, and yeah, that's the best feedback I get from this podcast, is someone listening and they're struggling with something and they hear a story that's relatable to them, and then it just makes them feel like less alone or something. So yeah, I really care about like just the impact on a single person that something could, this thing. But yeah, it's not like a super broad, it's not like I'm influencing like millions of people who are listening to this. It's more just like trusting in the universe that the message will get to the right person at the right time, or whatever that is.
I love that.
Sorry, so long. I'm meant to be talking about part 2 of your life.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to stop podcast interviewing you. You can do questions again.
Okay, what were we even talking about? Being morning people. Oh yeah, no, the last thing I wanted to say about that was my friend Alex wrote this essay. It's so cool. Did I already send it to you? About self-consensus? Consensusism? No. I always say it wrong, but it's basically exactly what you're describing. Instead of forcing yourself, like the discipline approach, which works so well for a lot of people, I think particularly men. And sometimes you can discipline yourself your entire life and like be very successful, but at some point it's like going to break potentially. Anyway, it's like the opposite of that is just consensus, like what is in consensus in this moment for me to do. And then there might be resistance and parts fighting and like, well, I just want to eat a tub of ice cream, and another part's like, no, you fucking lazy, like you can't do that. But then you come to consensus of like, yeah, I am just going to do nothing right now, or just curl in a ball, whatever. Just letting yourself do that in every single moment is just like the way to live. And yeah, I think me and Alex talk about it in a podcast episode for anyone's interested. And the essay's so good on Substack. Because it's not like, I mean, I even had that after Vipassana as like a mini rebound. I just watched TikTok and like ate junk food for a week. And then it's like you get bored of that. It's like, okay, this doesn't feel good. Like I want to eat a vegetable, or like I actually want to read a book and not just be watching TikToks till 1 a.m. And yeah, it's like people think, oh, if I didn't make myself work, I would just like lie on the beach forever. It's like, really? So boring. Like after a week or two. So, and naturally, like you do pay your taxes, like you do your washing. You're like, okay, I'm never going to do washing again because I don't feel like it. Eventually, you're like, I don't want to smell bad around people, so I'm going to wash my clothes. Or I don't want to just keep buying new clothes instead of washing them. So I'll wash them. And it's like, stuff happens. Without all the resistance.
If you remember, this was one of the questions that I put in my, like the questions I was exploring in that essay about selling right message. There were a few things on there about what's my relationship with self-discipline, and what do I want my relationship with self-discipline to be. Like, is the assumption correct that if I make myself do those things that I believe are long-term good for me, that I will have a better life. And I'm still running the experiments, but where I'm leaning is very heavily towards, no, it doesn't lead to a fulfilling life. The thing you're doing doesn't matter. Whether you're doing the difficult thing or you're not doing the difficult thing is much less relevant than what's my relationship with myself while I'm doing it. Because if I'm attacking myself to get it done, that's not like, then I'm not going to be feeling in connection with myself. And ultimately that's the feeling that we're trying to, like, that's what we're trying to get, right? It's like, if I do these things, then I'm going to feel good. But the feeling comes first and the actions follow in a way as well. So if I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing, if I'm doing it from a place of, I need to manage myself into doing this, my experience is that doesn't ever lead to things feeling good. And at the same time, like you say, the more that I develop that relationship with myself and get more in touch with what it is that I want to do, it's not true that I keep, fucking around watching Netflix and lying on the beach for my whole life. There might be some of that. You see the same with someone was talking about this with kids who leave school, like switch to kids who leave school for a while because for whatever reason things are not working out for them in a school setting, and they get to go home, and it's like, you don't have to work, you don't have to do schoolwork, you can just chill at home. And what happens is they spend a few months chilling at home, and then they start asking to learn, or they start going and learning things themselves. But like, we have this natural drive to learn, to grow, to evolve, to get stuff done, and it might not be there all the time. Sometimes what you need to do in that moment is rest. But there is such a fear that if we rest, we're never going to accomplish anything, and it's just not. I'm seeing how limiting that assumption might be. It's this thing of like, plants don't try to grow, but they still grow. Like, it's the natural way of everything to grow and evolve.
Mm-hmm. And I guess just because we were talking about that stuff before, the only thing I would say is, if someone's having thoughts of like, well, if I just did whatever I feel like I feel like hurting people, or I feel like hurting myself, or I feel like just drinking myself into oblivion or whatever, that's where you can get help. That's where IFS, for example, and plenty of other tools are so helpful, to be like, okay, I'm doing this behavior that I don't want to do, or I'm having urges to do something that you're not in consensus with, because it's not every part of you that wants to hurt someone or yourself. It's like one part that might overwhelm the system. So it's like, then you can get help to heal that part. Because that part's just acting from whatever place it feels like that's the way to help you, but there's something underneath that it's protecting, that's in a lot of pain, and then you can do that healing, and then that will go away. I mean, amazingly, that's how it happened with me in IFS. It was like insane. Anyway, obviously
IFS has been
harder.
IFS has been a huge unlock for me as well, with things like that, because IFS for me is what helped to just remove all the shame, because suddenly, instead of beating yourself up, there's this like, there's a concept of another entity in some way. There's like, I'm not, like, there is a part of me that wants to do that. That's not the whole of me. And that is something, for me, there's something so freeing about that little bit of distance. Like, it's all little characters in me. And now I might not love that behavior, but now I'm not beating myself up for it. Like I find it so much easier to do. It unlocks self-compassion. Like I find it so much easier to have compassion for a part once you label it as a part than to just blanket have compassion for the entire self all in one go.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then we can have compassion for other people's parts as well that are doing like some of the most like heinous, that are doing anything. That honestly, I'm like, this can like cure the world. Like, I'm like evangelical about it. Because it's like then all the shame disappears, even with the most heinous thing you can think of, like, you know, child sexual abuse or something. It's like that's the most fucked up thing. And that person has been like overcome by some part of them that feels like for their, I mean, obviously this is like simplifying it, but based on whatever happened in their life, and then a part of them feels like it has to do this to other people to protect the system or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, but they're also just a human. Oh yeah, which comes back to my first, what we're talking about at the start of the other episode, of your values, and one of them being like non-judgment.
It's my
And
top
me saying
value.
it relates to my favorite quote about evil running through the heart of every one of us.
Yeah. And so that's the, for so many of those behaviors that we most dislike to see from people in society, it's the shame that's holding, the shame is what's holding that behavior cycle in place. And so, yeah, like you say, just getting that distance on it as a part, if that allows you to just reduce the shame even a little bit, then there's potential for, like, behaviors can shift really fast as soon as the shame comes out. I mean, I have a hypothesis at the moment that is any behavior that you want to change can change within days, maximum a few weeks. You can change any habit, any behavior once you get the shame, once the shame is cleared. This thing that like habits take years to change, I don't think it's true. I think it can take a long time to work through shame. But as soon as the shame is cleared, behaviors change immediately. Is my working theory.
Wow. I'm gonna try this with my late night eating lollies. Because it is like this shameful, like, oh my god, it's so bad that I'm eating all this sugar before bed. But it's like, no, whatever. Just eat it. Who cares? If you want to have it, have like 10 bags. And then you're like, gross, no. Um,
And there'll be a reason why the part wants to do that. And there's a quote that I love from Marshall Rosenberg, the author of Nonviolent Communication, which I know you
yes,
also
I'm
love, and
fucking obsessed with him.
it's on our list to talk
R.I.P.
about. He talks about, like, after he worked in prisons with rapists and child molesters, and he had this quote that was, part of it was, if you want someone to change the way they're behaving, you've got to make sure they don't hate themselves for doing it in the first place. Like, that's what locks it all in. No one has ever become bad by being told, but no one has ever become good by being told they're bad. It doesn't. You see, it's the same thing that you see in the studies about how do you motivate your team in a workplace. And it's very well established that punishing someone for doing something wrong is not the most effective way to create change in the direction you want it. And it's exactly the same with ourselves. If you're hating yourself for it, it doesn't change.
Yeah, which isn't, by the way, obviously, to say that there shouldn't be consequences for that behavior. It's not like let all the rapists and pedophiles and murderers like roam freely. But I always use the example of a child. It's like you have like it is not loving of a parent to just let a child like do whatever the fuck it wants, destroy the house and just be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, no, you have boundaries, but they're very loving boundaries because you want the best for your child. So you tell it from a place of like compassion and understanding. Hopefully, I mean, not always, because it's like you're just doing your best as a parent. But anyway, and that some behaviors aren't okay, and then but ideally not shame. But yeah, then
That's exactly it.
how this cycle continues, because we then are shamed for all this stuff we do with kids, and then we grow up thinking that we're bad and whatever. Anyway, that's a whole nother point.
Shall we carry on my life story?
Yeah. Half an hour later. Okay, what recapping the first episode quickly. Well, if anyone wants to hear the whole growing up story, they can listen to part 1. But recapping, I guess from the career arc, we talked about a lot of other stuff, family stuff, emotional stuff, but the kind of career arc, because that's where we're going to pick up, is you started designing web pages when you were 10 and charging people like 50 quid or something, which was pretty punchy for a 10-year-old back then. Anyway, so you're doing that through school, you went to uni. After uni, I have a question for you. So after uni, you went to start a business, an app.
Yes.
How were you supporting yourself during that time, which was like 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah, maximum. I can't remember exactly how long, but I had savings from the company I'd been, like the business from when I was 10 years old. So money had been accumulating. And I carried on doing some consulting work, contracting work alongside. And the margins are high, right? It's software development. I would do like a day's work or a few days' work for a company, and that would fund me for months to sit and work on this app that ultimately made no money.
And at what point did you decide to pack it in with the app?
It's a good question. What did happen? So I think I let it run for a while, but it just wasn't. I think the consulting was building up more and more and was exciting. And this app got to a point after some time had passed where it wasn't doing so well. I knew why it wasn't doing so well, and I wasn't as motivated to carry on working on it as I was to work on this. Yeah, I think by then I was doing like mobile app consulting. I had learned, so when the iPhone first came out, when the App Store first came out, I didn't have an iPhone, but I think I sensed, I intuited that it was going to be a really big deal. And so I learned how to make apps, and I was curious about it. And I taught myself how to make apps in the very early days of the iPhone. And I didn't use that skill for a while, but gradually like demand started coming for that more and more. And it was like, oh yeah, I can do that for you. So I was doing some of that. I was doing some like business consulting around it, like helping companies figure out their technical strategy and whatever. It was I was motivated. I was enjoying that, and that just built up more and more. And this app startup that just didn't seem to be going anywhere just withered. And at some point, I cut it off.
And so, were there any feelings of like, oh damn, I've failed?
I wasn't in touch with my emotions enough at that point to be able to have. I didn't have the emotional vocabulary to like say that sentence that you just said. It's really interesting looking back. Like I would have framed it as, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And underlying that, for sure, there would have been feelings of, like, there would have been how I felt about the fact that it didn't do how I wanted it to do. There would have been feelings about myself, and the relation with that. And I had no, like, introspection was just this, like, world that I would not let myself go into. Even in school, I wouldn't. Remember, you'd do, like, at the end of the term or the year or whatever, there would be a, like, write about how you felt this year. What was your favorite thing? What was your? I was like, I like refused to do those exercises. So it was just like just a box I didn't want to open.
Interesting. I mean, those exercises are kind of painful, to be honest. Huh. Okay. So then you were doing the consulting stuff, and then you met your co-founder through the like freelancing website you were using to find work.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And I got into that whole community. That was the first time that I found a community around work that I really loved. I spent a lot of time before that, like, going to networking events, like local networking events, and it didn't feel like I couldn't really articulate at the time, but like it just didn't feel like my people. You know, it didn't feel like my tribe. And I'd go to like business events and whatever, and it just wasn't. But that was the time when I found like the conferences that just were with really like-minded people, and I was like, oh, like work can be really, like, I found my work people. That happened then.
Cool. What year was that?
We're somewhere around 2017 at this point. Oh, I loved those conferences because they weren't like big industry conferences. They were 100 people who I just got on really well with in a room. It was the kind of thing, it was like, we would describe it as like summer camp for grown-ups. You'd just spend a few days with these people. You'd get to the end of the conference and you'd realize that you hadn't found out what the person, like, you've spent days with this person getting on really well, and you're like, I actually don't know what your business is, because you're just connecting as people. It was such a nice, probably the equivalent of like mainstream Twitter and then like Teapot.
And this is people who are interested in building like lifestyle SaaS businesses.
Yeah.
Meaning,
and like,
go on.
Go ahead.
Meaning building businesses that aren't going to be like, that aren't trying to be like a unicorn or something. They're just businesses to support your life.
Yeah. There was always this underlying value of, if you can make enough money that you don't have to worry about money, and you can spend time with your family and your friends, and then like that's the ultimate. That's the path. That's the path that these people preferred than, let's try to make a product that, like you say, makes $1 billion, and I don't care how much I have to work to do it, but like the priority is impact. This is like, the priority is I enjoy my life with my family, and I have plenty of money to do that.
Cool. Okay, so then you were working full-time on this business from that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
And what was the product?
So that was it was an online marketing tool called Right Message that was it was for online marketers to find out more about the people who are on their website and personalize the content that their audience would see based on who they were, what they'd already bought, what they were interested in. So it just like made a more tailored experience for your customers. You'd sell much more stuff to them and they'd get much more of what they want from you. It was a whole suite of marketing, like email and online marketing tools to help you make more money.
And so how was that experience?
That was a great experience. It was a roller coaster. There was like, because it had like we built up a lot of interest beforehand, and we had this really big launch and like started building up a team, and then we got to a point where like it wasn't going as well as we thought, and then so like it was a whole there are a couple of other podcasts where I talk about the whole journey. That we can point people to, because the whole journey takes a while. But it was a really great experience. And then the ups and downs. It was a really great experience.
Okay.
It was
and this was like 5 years, 5 or 6 years.
Yes. Yeah. In the meantime, so that started, what did we say, 2017? Yeah. During that whole roller coaster, we've got my whole like leaving the UK accidentally.
Oh wow. Wait, when did these other podcasts come out where you talk about this?
There's a couple like along the way. There's some like there's a talk that I gave at a conference about the roller coaster of the first few years. It's on YouTube somewhere. That would have been 2021 or something. No, earlier. It was before COVID.
Oh my god, I'm so annoyed at myself. Usually I'm so good on the research.
Oh.
Wow. Okay, I'll have to listen to this after this. No, but that's fine because we're going to focus on the more like life stuff, I guess. Like,
cool.
And the last year. Like, I feel like that's more interesting. Yeah, people can find, we can hear about the business elsewhere on the other podcasts.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Okay, so then you moved to Barbados randomly in 2020.
Yeah, January 2021. So, I didn't move there. I went for 2 weeks, and then I didn't leave.
Why did you go for 2 weeks?
So, I got divorced in 2020. We broke up. April, May, maybe. And so had that whole... we need to start there to get to the Barbados story.
Okay, and you got married a couple of years before to your uni girlfriend that you mentioned in the last episode.
Yes. Yeah, we got together at the end of uni, so 2013. We got married in 2018. We broke up 2020.
Mm-hmm. While you were right in the middle of like building the business, or like at that point you were like,
the business. So Right Message by that point was doing well at that point, and then COVID came, and like we dropped a few percent of like people panic canceling, but we were still bringing in a decent amount. That was like I'm so grateful to have had that business and that co-founder, that when I was going through the divorce and like my head was not in a place to be grinding on the business, I didn't need to be grinding on the business. Like I barely had to touch it. Like between the way that the business was, it wasn't self-sustaining, but it wasn't like, it was all recurring revenue. If you didn't do anything one month, you'd get the same income the next month. At least in the short term. And then with Brennan and whoever else taking care of things, it was like Brennan was able to be like, Shai, don't worry about it. Like, you'll work when you can work, and if you're not up to working, just don't. And I was like, and that was amazing. So yeah, the business was at that point. It was at a point where it was making money, and it was, yeah.
okay, so you weren't one of those people who like just was full into work to avoid experiencing any of the emotional stuff.
No, in my head, no. Like no, and there was nothing else to throw myself into because it was lockdown. And this is, I still think like this was it's probably the hardest, most intense way to go through a breakup, but also ultimately the most effective. Was like I just had to face the whole thing head on and do all my processing, and like I couldn't escape it to like go out and drink or go out and whatever because the whole country was closed. I had my bubble with my brother and sister-in-law that like I could go to theirs for like dinner, and that was like, there was nowhere else to go. And so that was when I started. Like that was when I went to therapy for the first time, and learned that I had emotions and an inner world, and like that was the beginning of what people would describe as like the self-realization, the self-discovery journey. I feel I find it more accurate to model it as everyone is on a self-discovery journey. That was the point where I became conscious that I was on one.
So was that like the lowest point of your life?
Yeah. Yeah, that was like, yeah, that was depression symptoms for a while. That was like not eating, not sleeping for a little bit. Therapy was just like my life support at that point. I found this therapist that I got on really well with, and I don't know how long it was for, if it was just the first week or few weeks or whatever, but it was like 3 times a week I would go to her online. And part of that was just like processing this very difficult period of my life, and part of it was discovering that like you're not just like you have, it was so empowering. It was this like, you have emotions and you're not wrong for having emotions. Like they're valid, and like crying is okay, and like let's see what's going on inside your inner world. And as soon as I felt like as soon as I had the permission and realization that that was a thing, I was just hooked on like, I want to learn everything about myself. This is amazing. Like this whole inner world that I had been unwilling to look at, or not even realize there was anything to do there, like behind this shield of yeah, everything's fine. I'm great. Other people struggle with emotions. I'm fine. As soon as I had the as soon as I gave myself the permission to see that I had an inner world, it was like, I'm so curious to explore all of this and understand what I am.
Cool. How did you find the therapist?
As in, where did I find them?
Yeah.
Online. Like, I went online on like a local directory and her bio or whatever, like, just happened. She was the first one I called, like the first one I spoke to. It wasn't, something about her bio. I was like, I feel like I would get on with that one. And I called her and I was like, yeah, cool, great. Carried on seeing her for years.
Cool. So you were just like, I'm not coping. I need to see someone, or did someone like suggest it to you?
It was a combination of, it wasn't other people suggesting it. It was me. I think at the very beginning, it was also a like, let's see if it was like she was also she did solo therapy. She also did like couples counseling. So I think at the very beginning, it was like let's maybe see about going to her as a couple, see what we can do here. But so yeah, I think that was kind of the origin of it. But it was basically like, we're drowning, let's go.
And did you have a lot of shame to work through at that point of like divorce or like what's happening to me suddenly having emotions?
Yeah, I mean, there was, it was one of those things where like when you hit rock bottom like that, it's like these emotions are too painful to suppress. Like, I had no choice but to face them. And when you hit rock bottom in that way, it almost like, it became easier to do those things like go and get a therapist that I would have dismissed at any point earlier. Because you're just kind of drowning and scrambling for anything. Like, when your identity is shattered like that, it's absolutely the easiest time to, I don't know if this is the same for everyone, but it like that for me, that was the easiest time in a way to make changes like that. Because it didn't feel like there was another choice.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like when the pain of not change, it's only when the pain of not changing becomes greater than the pain of staying the same. I think that we can make that as a universal comment. Because like people can stay stuck in bad relationships or bad jobs or bad whatever habits that are affecting their health for years and decades. But it's like if there's a breaking point, if it becomes unbearable, that's when it changes.
Yeah. And so I then had that, like, that 6 months, 6 or 9 months of really just exploring, like, who am I now? Like, it is that, like, your identity has been destroyed in some way. And so it rebuilds as, like, a more up-to-date one. Like, things that, you discover more of your values. You start to figure out who you really are more. And without any possibility of distraction because of like, COVID and lockdown, that was the focus of that time. And so then you get to the end of 2020, and we've like there's like there was months of like sorting out the divorce stuff, like you've got a house to sell, like there's a whole, and we eventually got everything sorted. The house, like exchanged on the house. This is like just before Christmas to complete mid-January. And so I'm like, okay, I was living at the house at this point. So I'm like, okay, now it's time to figure out like where am I going next? Like, do I get another place like locally to where I am? Do I go like, there were a few options of, and it was still like, it's COVID. Like, no, it was a weird time. You didn't,
that was a miserable time, that January. Because the start was like fine in 2020, but then that January, it was bleak. Where in London were you?
Borehamwood, North London. Barely even London. Not my favourite place, looking back. So yeah, I start looking at where to go, and I'm like, okay, maybe I could take the opportunity to go and visit my sister and her family in Glasgow. That was like one of the things, one of the options. And so I'm like looking at the COVID laws to be like, what am I actually allowed to do at this point? And I'm like, when you sell a house, you're basically not bound by any of these stay-at-home laws. Like you're allowed to go out to move to a new house. There's a whole thing in the legislation that was like, if you're homeless, none of this applies at all. Because like if you're homeless, there can't be laws that tell you to stay at home. And so I'm looking at these options and I'm like, if I can go to Glasgow, I can go anywhere. Like, I'm not thinking big enough here. I'm like, could I go on holiday? Like, could I book into an all-inclusive resort somewhere sunny and go and chill there for do a couple of weeks there? And so I start looking at, I pull up the list of like where is letting people in from the UK, and there's like a dozen places, maybe 20, and then I narrow that down to the ones that the UK says you're allowed to go to, like so that your insurance is valid, and then I narrowed it down again to the ones that had flights, and I think there were then 3 places on this list. I was like, I could go on holiday to Barbados, Aruba, Dubai, I think were my options. And I just looked up package holidays. I was like, right, perfect. I found they were cheap at this point because there was no demand. Barbados is 29 degrees all year. And this is January. Like it was miserable in the UK. And so I booked to go. I'm like, I've had a really hard time. This is going to be such a lovely. I'm just going to go and lie on the beach 2 weeks in this all-inclusive resort in Barbados and then fly to Glasgow, visit my sister. And while I'm there, then I'll figure out my actual life plan. And I got to Barbados and it's like there was no COVID at the time. I met all these amazing people in my resort. Like you could go out, like the restaurants and bars were open. There were beaches. The sun was shining. Like really, really amazing people. And I think like day 2, I'm like, I can't go home in 2 weeks. Like it would be like, why would I go home in 2 weeks? And so I pushed my flight. I think I pushed it to 3 months, and then as that was approaching, it was like the UK was still. This is when the UK was on its like intense full lockdown for months and months, and everyone was miserable. And it was such a no-brainer. It's like I'm staying here. And Barbados I had my laptop. I was working remotely. The Barbados relies on tourism as its entire economy. And so very cleverly, when COVID hit and they lost all their tourists, they started a remote work visa. They just put out this advert to the world that was like, if you're working from home now, why don't you come and do it from paradise? And so at the same time that I showed up there, and I didn't even know about this visa when I arrived, but I show up and like 3,000 other people show up who all also don't know anyone. Some of them was like it was families with kids, because this visa would help them would allow them to put their kids in school. Like it was all figured out. But then like a lot of them was just like people my age. Everyone shows up on this island. No one else is there. Like it's like none of the tourists are there. And it felt like Freshers Week. It's like everyone wants to meet everyone. And you just have this, and we were just roaming free on this island. And it was this, I had this realization, this feeling of like, it was like I'd spent the previous 9 months figuring out who I am, like what my connection is with myself. And then was able to take that new, like, discovered identity into this like brand new, it was like a sandbox mode, like a playground of now you get to see how that, like, you get to play with how that interacts with other people in this brand new environment. Rather, like identity shift is hard when you're around the same people that you were with before, right? And this was just like, now you get this new world to explore. And it was just the most amazing year.
Cool. Oh my god. Okay, I know someone else who was there at that time. I'll message you after.
Yeah, we'll talk after.
And they were telling me about, they were like describing this to me. So
that island is
interesting.
the island is 14 miles wide. There's like, I will absolutely know the person you're talking about.
Yeah, I got trapped there once. Paradise turned into horror story when the US Embassy had my passport and I was like, I'm trapped on this beautiful island forever. But then they gave it back to me eventually. Because I was getting a visa. It's like, because I was living in the US, you have to leave the country to like change your visa or whatever, renew your visa or something. And then that's a popular place. Like, you're meant to go back to your home country, but that's a popular embassy.
Yeah.
To go to. So, and I'm like not someone who can just lie on the beach. So I literally went to every single like corner of Barbados, like did everything, like Mount Gay rum tour, like the sugar plantations, whatever, where Benedict Cumberbatch's family was from. I don't know. Like the wild side, the sandy lane where Tiger Woods got married.
Yeah.
So I assume were you on the side where like all the resorts are? When you first arrived?
I was on the south, so the west is the like Platinum Coast with all the like fanciest resorts, and the south is like the like more down to earth, but still quite touristy, but more mixed with local community side. And then the east and the north is like there are no tourists staying there. Almost.
Nice. Yeah, we did it all. I think started on the north, then went on the west for a bit, then ended up on the south when it was like, fuck, we're stuck here. Need a cheaper option.
How long were you there for?
No, it wasn't that long. But I'm like an efficient holidayer. So anyway.
Yeah, so we had that island pretty much. Like, you just like there were boats every weekend, like, because there were no tourists using them.
Wait, so how long did you stay the first stint that was meant to be 2 weeks?
So my 2 weeks ended up being 11 months.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So you had to buy like all new stuff?
So the thing is, you could, like, if you have stuff for 2 weeks and you have and you can wash that stuff, like 2 weeks of stuff can last you, and the weather doesn't change. It's 29 degrees every day. So like, and it's summer clothes. Like, so I bought some stuff, but I didn't need to buy that. I don't think I bought any more than I would have bought in a typical year where you're buying new clothes, right? But except my plan was 2 weeks there and then Glasgow in January. So most of my suitcase was winter clothes, right? I had like the boots, the scarves, the gloves, like the winter jacket. And that was the majority of my suitcase. That was very not useful.
So did you get a more permanent place at some point, or you literally stayed in like hotels the whole time?
So I did 2 weeks in the resort. I looked at staying for longer, and some people did. Like there were people who, the first 6 months I was there, I didn't meet anyone who went home on the flight they had originally come in on, like had planned to go back on. Like everyone was pushing their flights back by various amounts. I looked at doing longer in the all-inclusive, and I was like, this is not. I don't have enough self-control for this to be a good idea. Like they're bringing me. I drank an ungodly amount of mudslides, like alcoholic chocolate milkshake, those first 2 weeks, and it's like that can't be my real life. Like for a 2-week holiday, great. I can't sit and drink vodka chocolate milk and eat like this all you can eat incredible food. So I moved out. I moved to a different hotel. The hotels were all empty. So I had a hotel suite for like the next 5 months with like my daily housekeeping, and there was like a bar and a restaurant there, and about half a dozen other friends moved to the same hotel. So we all had, even when the lockdown did get worse and there were restrictions and like you had to be back on your resort, like on your property, we could still hang out by the pool. Like it was cool. So 5 months there, and then I moved to an apartment. Like, and again, it was incredible. Like my entire bedroom wall was like a giant window straight onto the ocean, and there was a pool, and it was amazing. And I've inquired since, to rent that place for a month now would be $20,000 a month, and I was absolutely not paying anything close to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was everyone at home like, what are you doing? Or they were like, okay, whatever.
Oh, they were like, I think they would have thought I was mad if I came back. Like they all totally got it. Like everyone was miserable. No one was allowed out their house. Like you could go out for one walk per day in the cold. No one was questioned. Everyone was just like, you jammy bastard. This is the best thing. Like it wasn't a decision until July. Everything opened up in the UK. That was the first time that I had an actual decision to make of where would I prefer to be. Like before that, it made no sense to go home. After that, it was just a choice to stay. And then toward the end of that year, my dad got very ill, and so then I had to figure out then I learned a lot about decision making and about what to do when you have conflicting values.
So that's ultimately why you decided to leave.
I was planning to leave at that point anyway. Like I had mid-December in as like, it was like, it's now been a year since I've seen my family and friends. That seems like a good time to go back. I didn't know how long I was going back for, and what ended up happening is I went back, did a few weeks there, went to see some friends in Europe, in Slovenia, and then like within 2 months of leaving Barbados, I went back to Barbados.
Wow.
Just for like a few weeks, just to go and like catch up with everyone that was there, and yeah.
Okay, just for a few weeks. You didn't move back.
Just for a few weeks. And then by that point, like now it's kind of become like I think I had a trip to America planned, and then by that point it's like, oh, I've kind of become a digital nomad. I don't have a fixed place that I live now. So I was back to Barbados a few times that year. I was back to other places, like I was visiting other places. I spent this summer in the UK. Like I was.
Where was all
nomadic.
your stuff?
So when you go somewhere with a suitcase for 2 weeks and you stay for a year, you realize you don't need that much stuff. So there was a lot of stuff from back in when I was living in London. There was all that stuff was stored at my parents' house, like kitchenware and like whatever. And after a year of not needing any of that, I was a bit like, I'm just gonna, this stuff can all go to charity, and next time that I need permanent stuff, I'll get new permanent stuff. But yeah, I ended up, I had the contents of a suitcase, maybe a big and a small suitcase. And then if I went somewhere with a different climate, like I would normally, the UK was quite a good base, even if I was moving from one place to another. I'd normally come back through the UK, see everyone, catch up with everyone. I could go to my parents, swap out like the suitcase if I needed some winter stuff instead of some summer stuff. But I was more or less, I was a couple of suitcases.
And you didn't have loads of furniture or whatever from the house?
No, I got rid of it.
Yeah. Books is my main thing.
There's a lot of books stored at my parents', yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's what, like 2022. So 2021, you were in Barbados pretty much the whole year. And then 2022, you were kind of nomadic.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it was I was still working, I was traveling, and once you start doing the traveling thing, you start it like compounds, right? Because now you start knowing, like, you meet people from all over the world, and so now there's a whole world more places to go and visit. Everyone's going to go and like, it's someone's birthday, we're all going to meet up in Portugal, or like, and I was working remote and had the flexibility to just do that. Like, there was never, until this year, there was never a time where it didn't just fall into place where it would make sense for me to go next. Everything, it just kept unfolding. Like, sometimes I knew a couple of months in advance. Sometimes it wasn't until like that week that I knew where I was going next. I'd be like, I'm moving out of a place on Friday and haven't decided where to, but I'll figure it out. And things just always came up at the right times. There was a bunch of, I was still really into like the whole self-discovery thing. So I spent some time, I went to an Eckhart Tolle retreat at one point.
Cool. I didn't know that's a thing.
Not as cool as I spent some time at Michael Singer's temple.
Where's that?
The guy, the Surrender Experiment guy.
Oh,
and
cool.
Untethered Soul. He has a temple in Florida, so I got to hang out with him, which was amazing. Very, very impressive guy. Yeah, so 2022, 23 was nomadic.
And at what point did you leave the business?
April 2023.
And that just kind of naturally unfolded.
That once I realized how much it just wasn't fulfilling, wasn't serving me, that also just kind of unfolded fast. Yeah. Like, it probably unfolded slow in the sense that I could have recognized it. No, but it unfolded exactly how it was meant to unfold, as everything does. I realized it wasn't right for me. I realized that, yeah, it was another one of those decisions that once I looked at it, it was so clear that it was the right thing.
Okay, and the healing kind of process, which is obviously never linear, but so it was like a whole 9 months of like intense stuff back in London. Then it was like Barbados trying out this new identity. But presumably there were still points of like feeling sadness and like coming to terms with the new reality.
Yeah, for sure. And like getting back into dating after like a long time. So like yeah, like everything that happens, you learn more about yourself, right? So yeah, there was more grieving, there was more whatever, but there was something very, because I'd had such an intense time processing it all in London through lockdown. There was this real sense when, like that day when the house sold, the house completed, I got on that plane, completed while I was on the plane. Like the stewardess came over with like a whiskey for me, and we had a little. Like, I mean, she didn't drink whiskey, but we like had a whole like congratulations, like this. That was like a very like that kind of marked the okay. That's that chapter. Like you never fully process. Like you never fully like when is grief like grief is never finished, but like you integrate it into you, and that really felt like a time like that flight was like okay, this is that chapter has a bow on it now, and now I get to enter into the world again.
And because I'm just assuming, was it like your life, because you weren't in touch with your emotions or whatever, so it's kind of like you're going along at some point and then it's like rock bottom, but then I'm guessing you come out of it like above like you're much more alive if suddenly then you're in touch with your emotions, and then it's like amazing, like my life's like better than it ever has been before despite everything.
Yeah, and there were still lots of lows, but I had like it was such a superpower to be able to not feel shame around the fact that you're feeling low, like to not have shame around the concept of a negative emotion. So those lows became so much richer as well, where it's like I was still quite in my head. That's something that's shifting a lot this year. Like I was still being very intellectual about processing my emotions. Embodying it has come more recently. So there was a lot of time, like probably like grinding the wheels, like talking to like when life situations would happen, I'd be able to acknowledge the feelings, which was really amazing to be able to do. But I was still doing a lot of overthinking about them. There was still a missing ingredient of if you really let yourself feel it, then things shift in a very different way.
Yeah, that's me. Like
Yes,
getting
because we're on
so
exactly the same journey.
not exactly the same. I bet you're okay for some woo-woo-ness. Was it your Saturn return during that time when all that happened?
I have no idea what that means, but I would
Wait,
love
how
if the answer is yes.
old are you? 33.
33.
So 4 years ago. Yes. Oh my God, this keeps happening. The people are talking on this podcast about this big dramatic breakup of their life, like really falling apart. I know for everyone it was like a lot of shifts happened during COVID. And it's happened during the Saturn return, which is this totally like, it's like astrology. It's like when Saturn is in the same place as when you were born, which is a real thing in science. So like when Saturn in the sky is at the same point, it's like 29, around 27 to 29 years, I think. No, 29.5 years, something like that. But then supposedly when it returns to the same point, it's like your life, like all these major things happen in life, like a lot of things falling apart, and then but quickly, like changes quickly, like you describing, like whoa, it was like that 6 months like intense healing journey, which yeah, it happened to be COVID and everything. But yeah, that lines up. 4 years ago, you were 29.
You know that meme of the guy texting his mum, when was I born?
Yeah.
And she's just like, stay away from her.
So funny. Yeah, but it's like super mainstream. Oh my God. Okay, this is a good point to wrap up because my phone just gave me the warning that it will shut down all the apps.
Okay.
We're recording on my phone, everyone, audience. So hopefully the sound quality's fine. But yeah, I feel like we could have like a whole. We haven't got that far, mainly because I've just been talking a lot. We had that 30-minute intro. But I feel like we could have a whole chapter, different lens on like your healing journey, which is like obviously will keep evolving. But that's so interesting. Like I'm so interested to learn about the Eckhart Tolle thing, the Michael Singer thing. You know how the journey evolved.
Yeah.
So, and then also, I guess that makes sense with what, because we haven't really. You wrote this blog post, which people can read, which I think kind of, that's why I'm not like desperate to be like, wait, but so how was it leaving the job and everything? Because it kind of like makes sense through that post. But I guess it will also make sense in the context of like the whole self-discovery journey or whatever that you've been on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then what I'm really excited for is how those things all continue to unfold into the future. Because I see all like they're kind of these separate strands at this point. There's like a business strand, and there's a self-discovery strand, and there's a like technical software kind of strand. And like they're all, I see them all intertwining into the future, and yeah, I'm excited.
Cool.
Cool.
So, anything else to add? Wait, okay, but just to finish the Nomad, so the Nomad chapter, and then for this year, you decided to like settle in Belfast for the year because there was like, I think you mentioned that on the last podcast, or maybe you told me, but because you met a girl, yeah, you said on the last podcast, you saw someone at a wedding, their flat was free for the year. And
Yeah,
so
it's
that's
not
where
even a
you're.
year. It's just a few months. After the nomadic thing was like it goes through phases of like you're doing everything, like just like very intense socializing all the time, and then it's like, okay, now I just want to chill in one place for a while. Like I want to be in a place for long enough to have spices in the spice rack. Like I want to buy spices. That's like the measure of. And so I got to that point this year, and I'm doing a few months in Belfast, which
How many more months to go?
I think about another. I think I'll like end of October or into November. That'll be the end of. It's like another 6 weeks or something. Which has been a really interesting. Like I struggled to. This was the first time that I had struggled to figure out where to go next. And then this, I just had to be patient with it, and then this fell into my lap like literally there's this spare 2-bedroom apartment right on the river. It's beautiful. Do you want it for a few months? And something about it just felt like the right vibe, and it has been. It's exactly what I needed to just have this taking myself off to the side for a little bit, almost outside of the real world for a couple of months, just to do I feel like it's almost like iterating between like self-discovery as it relates to other people and the world, and then like oscillating to this, now it's time to do some self-discovery by myself. And that's been really powerful. We can talk about it, but like in the next. That's been so powerful. And then you take that back into the real world again. Like it's kind of what I described happening with 2020 and 2021 on a smaller scale, like for a shorter time, but kind of doing that again. And it's been really powerful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. We look forward to hearing more.
Thanks,
Any
Julia.
final words? The phone's got.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I thought you were gone.
God, I'm freaking out that I lost the recording.
Right?
Hopefully not. I think it's that. Okay. Any final words? I hope you're still there in November because I want to come and visit. I've never been to Belfast. It's been on my list. And the Giant's Causeway.
And so I haven't been there yet. I've got a friend coming to visit soon. I think I'll leave Giant's Causeway until she comes, and we'll both go and do like all the tourist things. Because otherwise, I'm going to do them all now, and then friends will visit, and then I'll be doing them again. Do you know we're still recording?
Yeah. Any final words?
Okay,
or are you happy for that to be our ending?
I'm happy for that to be the ending.
Okay, great. Because then it saves me from having to stitch it together.
And I don't know if I'll still be here. I mean, we don't need to make plans for you visiting. If anyone listening to the podcast would like to visit with Delia, yeah,
we'll schedule it. Okay. No, any final words for the podcast?
No, this was great. Thank you for having me again.
Thanks for coming on. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this conversation. Feel free to share it with someone if you think they'd get something out of it. And you can also subscribe or follow the podcast so then you find out about new episodes. And purely for my own ego, no, just kidding. I think it actually helps the algorithm and helps more people find the podcast. If you want to rate or review, go for it. And see you next time.